Hey, y'all. I hope you're all having a great week. We're going to finish up our narrative about Abraham, Abram, Sarai, and Sarah, and the impending news of Isaac's birth. We are going to cover a little bit of ground. We're going to kind of hopefully wrap a few things up, but we're going to be in, let's see, we've kind of cut around, right? So we're going to be in the last part of 17, all of 16, and the first half of 18. So let's start. This time we'll be in a little bit of an order. We're going to start in Genesis 16, and we're going to learn a little bit about why the issue with Hagar bearing the promised child was just not a smart idea, right? So let's look at our first few verses. I love how God is continuing the work that he started way back in chapter 12. You ever had a moment where you tried to help God manage your life, right? It didn't really go well, right? We do know what's best. We do have this kind of pride in us that, oh, we know what's right, what's wrong. But really, it's God. God is the one that has to be in complete control of us and control of our lives, and that takes submission. Sarah and Abram, they have decided that they're going to add a third person to the mix. Obviously, two was not enough, and God was not moving as quickly as they had anticipated. And this has absolute major ramifications, not just for them. Of course, it's definitely going to impact them, but it literally is going to impact us today. We see that God has a perfect plan, and we only need to obey. He doesn't work on our timetable. We don't always get the results when we think that they're due, but God has a unique way of working things out the way he sees them, and we're the ones that have to get on his page. So let's look and see what the first few verses of Genesis 16 has to say. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, borne him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go unto my servant, that it may be that I shall obtain children by her. Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. And so after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram as her husband, as his wife. Notice there's a lot of usage of names and pronouns here. We have three people in this particular narrative. Abram, he is the husband. Sarai is his wife. Hagar is a female Egyptian servant. That is very important. The author is intentionally letting the reader know how each of these people are related and who they are to each other. Their identity is critical in understanding this particular passage. Up to now, the talk of the covenant has been between Abraham and God. We don't have any narrative until now about Sarai getting into the conversation. I'm sure Abraham, being a good husband, has revealed some information to the wife, but this is where Sarah is at in her thinking. If y'all can kind of think along with me along these lines. What is my role in the covenant? God all along has been telling Abraham, they're going to come from you. They're going to be your children, your offspring. But where is Sarah's mind at right now? What is she thinking? I think she's probably thinking the way I would be is, what is my contribution to this plan? What is my role? What is my, hold on, I have a naughty cat. But what is my particular help with this? I know you're going to have a covenant. I know there's going to be a child. I wish I could see what's happening off camera because it's like hysterical, this cat. But where is my purpose in all of this? She is childless. She knows she's childless. She realizes that God has prevented her from having any children. And so she knows that there is a divine thing happening here. But like all good women, right, we have a plan, right? We have a singular focus on how to solve the problems of the world. Well, she is childless. And so she thinks, well, as the custom was, well, I will take Hagar, my female Egyptian servant, and he'll go and have relations with her, and then I'll take the child, and this would be my contribution. Not a great plan, right? Because that is completely against what God is trying to do. She does realize something very, very critical. God has stopped her from bearing children. That is extremely important. Sarah is not looking at the spiritual. She's only looking in the natural. She realizes that my womb is being shut up because of the Lord, but she's just stopping there. She needs to expand her focus. God is going to do something supernatural. They're going to have a natural child, but they're going to do it way past childbearing years for both of them. If she was fertile in the natural, would it really be a miraculous wonder if she had a child at 90? Not really. Sarah had to be in on the conversation, but she's trying to find her role. So this is what she came up with to kind of fill in that gap. Abram has made a critical error. And this error we see all the way back to Genesis 3:17. Let's see if y'all can kind of get a clue as to what the problem was. In Genesis 3:17, the Lord says to Adam, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and you have eaten of the fruit which I've commanded you of not to eat, there's going to be curses and consequences. Abraham or Abram has listened to the voice of Sarah, not God. God has spoken on this matter many times. God has given his opinion. God has given his will. God has given his covenant. God has made it really clear for the record what his will and intentions are. Abraham or Abram has not listened to the voice of God. Instead, he chose to listen to the voice of Sarah. Notice how quickly this happens. Abram listened, and then Abram goes in. So let's look at the next set of verses and we'll see. And he went in. Remember those vowels that we've been talking about so long? Those vowels are important because it is connecting. And he went into her immediately after this particular piece of information of, I'm going to give you my Egyptian female servant. Their identities are critical. Abram has a wife. It's Sarai. It is not Hagar. That is who he was supposed to have natural relations with, and not anybody else. They are also in covenant. Abram has chosen to not listen and to adhere to the plan God has, so he fails her and himself as a leader. He tries to put her back as a servant. In the next few verses, we'll see that. But she is now given the rights of a wife. This was not a one and done. This was Abram had a wife, had a female servant, and now he appears, he's got two wives, two women. That is not the ordinance of God. But we're going to see that there's some changes that's coming. And when Sarai sends Hagar in, Abram says, yes, I'll do this thing. Hagar conceives. Her womb is not shut up by the Lord. Her womb is open. And when Hagar sees that she is now a wife with a child on the way, she starts putting herself out of the role God has put her in as a female servant. So she now starts looking at contempt upon her her mistress, which is Sarai. She's kind of taken to this new position a little too well, right? She's now realizing she has trumped her mistress. So now she becomes very contemptible upon Sarai. Poor Sarai just cannot catch a break because Hagar now doesn't see a need to be submissive. The next set of verses, Sarah says to Abram, may the wrong you have done, may the wrong done to me, you've done something wrong. This is on you, buddy. This is your problem. I gave my servant to you. You embraced her. And when you saw that she conceived, she starts looking on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between me and you. And Abram says to Sarah, behold, she's your servant. You have the power over her. You go handle her as you see fit. Then Sarah deals very harshly with Hagar, and Hagar flees. So Sarah is angry. Really? I mean, like she couldn't see this coming down the road. But the wrong here in Hebrew is the Hebrew word for violence, or Hamas. We first see this word in Genesis 6:11 when the earth is filled with wickedness and corruption. The earth is filled with Hamas, violence. This action produces judgment. She's acted willfully. Okay, she has made a plan, she's done it, but the wrong here means there is judgment that is going to be coming. In fact, she's declaring judgment's coming to Abraham too. I think Sarah may have thought maybe in the back of her head, Abram was going to be super, super righteous and not take her up on this offer, but it doesn't happen. Abram never sees her as a wife. Abraham has always seen her as a servant. So he tells Sarah, she's your servant. You go handle her any which way you see fit. Not always a good thing either. Verses 7-10. Now the angel of the Lord finds Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness, and she is near a spring on the way to a land called Shur. And he says, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She says, I'm fleeing from my mistress, Sarai. And the angel said unto her, return to your mistress and submit. The angel of the Lord also says, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered. That is another fulfillment or another reminder. God is working on something here. There is going to be more children. And so when she is found, it really gives us a picture of redemption. When we disobey, we run away. When we disobey, we run and we hide, but God is always pursuing us. Hagar is a servant, may not have been her choice, but it is the lot that was given to her. But she has a responsibility in this whole mess too. She wasn't submissive. Sarah could have been a lot kinder, but Hagar was not submissive. And the submissive there in the Hebrew, it means to afflict. So in her submission to Sarai, there would be affliction. It's not going to be an easy road. I don't know if they had an easy road before, but it is definitely not going to be an easy road now. There is going to be punishment for her actions. There's going to be punishment for Abram. There's going to be punishment for Sarah. There's a lot of stuff going on here. But in the wilderness, God finds her like he does us so many times, and he gives her an option. He gives her grace. He gives her an opportunity to go back and start over again. Not that the consequences are going to be undone, but God will be with her. The next few verses, the angel says to her, you are pregnant, you're going to bear a son. His name is going to be Ishmael. The Lord has listened or seen you because of your affliction. And he gives her some information about what kind of man Ishmael was going to be. He would be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him. And he shall dwell over against all of his kinsmen. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are a God of seeing, for you have truly seen him who looks after me. Therefore, the well was called Beer-lahai-roi. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore a son to Abram, and Abram called him Ishmael. Abram was 86 when he bore Ishmael to Abram. God has a name for Ishmael. It means the Lord has listened, or the Lord has seen your affliction. The problem is Ishmael is going to be a wild donkey of a man. He's going to be rebellious. He is going to be against people, and they are going to be against him. We're going to finish up chapter 17. We had started 17 the week before. So here we get to the name changes. Abraham has had his name changed, and Sarai is going to have her name changed to Sarai. So I wanted us to pop over back into the Hebrew and look at what these names mean in Hebrew. Abram is going to be Abram, and he's going to have a character added. Sarai is going to be the S, and it's going to be the R and the I sound, which is the Yod. So Abram, if you look on your screen, you'll see the little kind of X-looking character. That is going to be the Aleph. Then the next character in Abram's name is the Beit, which is the B, then the Resh, and then the final form of the M. Looks like that little funny box. Sarai has the Sheen, which is that weird looking W, the same Resh, and the itty bitty character is the Yod. Notice that Abram is going to have the N, kind of looks like an open N character added to the M. That is the Hey. Sarah's also going to have the Hey added to the end of her name. But let's look about the Hey. The Hey is a very interesting little character. It has a numeric value of 5, which can indicate spirit or revelation or grace. God is removing something from them and giving them both his breath, his spirit, and his revelation. But we just had a conversation about circumcision in the last lesson. And so we're going to see Abram is going to circumcise his whole household. It's going to be a symbol of cutting out that flesh and getting something better from God in the spirit. But if we look at Sarah's name, Sarah has the S and the R, the Sheen and the R, the Resh, but she no longer has the Yod. The Yod has been cut out in order to make room for the Hey. God is giving her an abundance. God is giving Abraham an abundance of his spirit. These are our spiritual forefathers and foremothers. These are the ones who we have as our patriarchs. So when the Hey is added, it's more than just a name change in the physical. It is a spiritual change that is going to impact them literally for the rest of their lives. Verse 17 to 20, Abraham falls on his face and he laughs. He's going, wait a minute, I'm going to get a kid at 100? Can a 100-year-old man bear a child or make a child? Can Sarah, who is 90, bear a child? Are you kidding me? And he said, oh Lord, that Ishmael might live before you. He's wanting Ishmael to be the promise. He's wanting Ishmael because he's already here. He's been here. But God reminds him, and now he brings Sarah into the equation. No, Abraham, your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you too. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and multiply, and he will be a father of 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. Even though Isaac is the promise, he is the promise of the covenant, Ishmael is going to have an opportunity to do good too. He unfortunately just chooses a different path. Ishmael and Isaac are the two sons. One is the older, one is the younger. But in God's economy, it doesn't matter if you're older or younger, richer or poorer, male or female, it doesn't matter. God has a specific promise just for you and only you. And he's trying to get Abraham to understand Isaac is the one. I've already foresaw it. I've already ordained it. We are going to see that Isaac is the one everything hinges on. When God is finished talking with Abraham, God leaves him. Abraham takes his son and all of his people in the house, whether they're born or bought. He circumcises them all. And this is an immediate action. As soon as the Lord leaves, Abraham is on duty and he is circumcising everyone. Ishmael was 13 when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Abraham may not have understood everything that God was telling him on this day, but he obeyed immediately. All the men were circumcised, including Ishmael. Isaac is going to be circumcised at the ordinance of that covenant of 8 days. This is the sign of death in the flesh. I am circumcising something from me so I can make room for the spirit to flow. God often asks us to do things that don't make any sense, but he does want us to obey, and obeying means you're going to do it right away, all the way, and with the right attitude. The last part of our lesson is going to be in 18 verses 1 to 15. The first part is where we see Abraham. This is immediately after the circumcision. Immediately, because this opens with, you guessed it, Avav. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat in the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifts his eyes up, and behold, 3 men are standing there. Wow. Can you imagine that you're standing and here's all of a sudden you have visitors that you were not expecting. You just had surgery, and it's really not a good time to have company, right? What this really is saying in the Hebrew is that these men are not only just people or beings that look like men, they're actually over him. That there's a Hebrew word there when it talks about how they're standing in front of him. It really indicates they're still afar off, but they are in authority over him. If you want to say better than him, you may want to use that, or superior, but these beings are going to be supernatural beings that are over Abraham in an authoritative way. He sees them, he runs over, he bows. Now he's just had surgery, right? So he's in pain, he has to be in pain. And he says, Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, don't pass by my tent. Don't pass by your servant. Give me an opportunity to serve you. And so he serves them. He brings them in. He gives them water to wash their feet, to be refreshed, to relax in the cool of his tent under the trees. And he's preparing them food. He says, bring a morsel of bread so you can refresh yourself, that you may pass on once you have rested and been refreshed. And they say, okay, we'll do everything that you said. So he quickly gets some bread together, makes some little cakes, and he takes a calf that is ready to be slaughtered, and they have a nice meal prepared for men. Notice that as the men took the milk and curds that the calf and the calf that was prepared, sits it before them, and he stood by them under the tent while they ate. Abraham didn't eat. He was being a good hospitality person. He was being a good servant. One of your word study that you had to do brings us back to that circumcision piece. Circumcision in the natural is the circumcision of your flesh, typically males with their foreskins, right? But it's going to be a flesh versus spirit thing. We see that in the last passage we read, Abraham is entertaining angels physically and spiritually. The flesh that has to be cut off is in our flesh. That has to be cut off in order to make room for the spirit to come in. Ishmael and Isaac are these two comparisons of a man of the flesh and a man of the spirit. And so it's really important that we connect the physical and the spiritual together. These men are going to later go on to Sodom in our next narrative. But here they're enjoying being served with great hospitality of Abraham. Regardless if we feel like it in the flesh, when the Lord sends us people to minister to, we need to ask the Lord if this is really your people, because we don't want to entertain other beings without realizing it. But if God has given people an opportunity to come into our lives, it's important to serve them and to be hospitable. He wants to make sure that they're rested and refreshed. And I love that we have this opportunity too. Don't miss an opportunity to be a blessing to someone. Doesn't matter what you're feeling in your own body. Remember, Abraham had just been circumcised, so this is probably not the best day to show up. It's hot and he has to be discomforting. But I think serving the Lord and the people that the Lord sends to us is always a good thing. My only word of caution would be is to make sure you're doing what the Lord wants you to do when people come your way, and that you're not being overburdened or used by others, because sometimes what looks like service is really an opportunity that God is wanting to help us set boundaries for. I think God gives us opportunities to serve people all day long, but we do know that there are people that take advantage of that, and they become basically kind of like users, and they can wear us out. So make sure that you are serving with the heart of God, but make sure that God has sent you these people and they're not sent by somebody else. I love that we see that Abraham is waiting at the tree of Mamre. He's waiting on the next thing to unfold. And the angels have some parting words for Abraham and Sarah. They're going to give some more information. We know that they are eagerly waiting for this baby to arrive, and they now have a timeline. God gives these angels the words of when Sarah is listening at the door. The angels share with Abram that there's going to be a child in the next year. Your wife is going to have a son. And Sarai laughed to herself because she's thinking, I am worn out. My Lord is old, he's old, and it's really too late for me to have this pleasure. And the Lord says to Abram, notice that the angels are giving some information, but now God himself is speaking. The Lord here in Hebrew is Jehovah. It is the Yud He Vav He, and it is actually God himself that is asking Sarah, or asking Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for me? Am I not God? Is anything too difficult? And he gives it again. At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah's going to have a baby. Sarah lied and denied it. She says, nope, I did not laugh. And God says, oh, but you did. So I love how God is now giving Abraham probably what he wanted in the beginning, a name and a timeline. Now we know at this time next year, they're going to have a baby, and it's going to be named Isaac, and it's going to be the one that we have been waiting on since chapter 12. The last thing we want to talk about is slave and free. That was one of your last discussion points. We see this first mentioned in Genesis 21:10 when Sarah says to Abram, cast out Hagar with her son. This is the first mention of this word slave. And we have lots of scriptures and things about slavery in the Bible. One of my favorites is in Galatians 4, verse 21 to 31. This talks about the slave and the free woman. It's basically a recap, a little bit of a recap of what's happening in our narrative here. Are you going to be called the children of promise or the children of the flesh? It is really simple. God has given us his rules to obey, and are we going to keep them or not? If we've decided we're going to be his people, called out, set aside, then we have to make a daily decision to circumcise that bit of flesh that is getting in the way of the spirit to flow within me. And walking in the flesh is not always great, right? There's always consequences. But when we walk in the spirit and the Holy Spirit is there, we're able to keep the law, be set apart and holy the way God intended. God has a way of communicating with us, and that's through prayer. It's through meditation, maybe journaling. But if we're not in the Bible and we're not reading scriptures and praying to the Lord, we're not going to know what he has for us. God has a plan for us, just like Abraham and Sarah. Our choice is, are we going to listen to God's plan and do it his way? Or are we going to do it the way we decide and the way we plan? When we walk in the spirit, we're able to keep the law and be set apart and be holy. That is our challenge today. That's our challenge every day. So I challenge you to get into the scriptures, dig in, and be set apart and be holy, because God has called us to be a holy people. See y'all next time.